Hey everyone, welcome to the Summer Hit New Podcast. Do zebras have tails? And if not, how do they swat the flies? I'm Cindy Schwartz.
I'm Debbie Becker.
And we are so excited to be here with you today as we answer questions for the curiously curious. And that's what this podcast is going to be all about. Each time we meet, each episode will just be about asking interesting questions, annoying at times, but interesting questions. And we're going to use our background to do that. So let me tell you guys a little bit about myself. I am a history teacher, high school, and I am also a radio announcer and a podcaster. And it is wonderful to be here with you. And I'm always going to look at the historical end of our questions. How about you, Deb?
Well, I'm a college professor. I teach English. I'm a naturalist and a photographer and a science nerd, a bit of a science nerd. And so I really am interested in learning history, and I hope you're interested in learning science. And we're both interested in educating our viewers.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That's why we wanted to do this. And there's so many different questions out there that have kind of plagued people since the dawn of time, at least we think. So, one of these, though, has not plagued people since the dawn of time, but it's certainly one that's on our minds today, right, Deb? So, we're going to do something pretty
Correct.
current right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are really interested in what is going on with the algae situation in Washington, D.C., and the reflecting pool. Right, Deb?
Yes, indeedy. It's turned a nice shade of green.
Oh, yeah. And it's supposed to be blue, American blue, so to speak. So we have to talk about what is happening at the reflecting pool. That's the question. And what is algae actually? What's going on? So I'll take a look at the historical end first with the reflecting pool itself, and then we'll go to the science end with Deb. So here we go. The reflecting pool, the history of it, we really have to go back to a guy named Henry Bacon. And he is born in the late 1800s, and he will pass in the early 1900s, 1924 to be exact. 1 year actually after the reflecting pool opened, and he was the architect, Henry Bacon. So he grows up in Illinois. He goes to college for a very short time, and he's not happy. And what he really wants to do is be a draftsman in an architectural firm. So he doesn't finish college and he moves to New York City actually and works as a drafting engineer in this very important company in New York City. And he loves his job. And for a certain period of time, he is traveling, he is going to Europe, he is learning about the Greek revivalist style. He is really into something called the Beaux Arts, which is really a combo of Greek and Roman architecture, you know, those Greek structures and architectural columns like the Ionic, the Dorian, and the Corinthian. He loves all that stuff. So he works for this company for a while. And then he decides to go out on his own with a friend to have their own company. He does that for a certain time. He designs more places in the city. And then he decides to go out on his own, just by himself. So Henry Bacon gets approached by a number of people who would like to see a reflecting pool in Washington. Now, mind you, before this, he was also asked to design the Lincoln Memorial. So he did not design the actual statue of Lincoln, but he did design those columns you see there. That's it. Almost looks like the Parthenon in Greece. Well, he designed that. And of course, the Lincoln statue is within that inside. So then it became really kind of an interesting proposal by a number of people to build a reflecting pool that would mirror the Lincoln Memorial as well as the Washington Monument. And then when you looked at them in the reflecting pool, it would just be a beautiful sight. So what does Henry Bacon do? He starts on this project. He begins the drafting of this project. And what I found out, Deb, that's super interesting is that it was basically a swamp there before the reflecting pool. Did you know that? It was a swamp?
I did not. I do have
Okay,
photo
so
evidence.
it was a swamp called Kidwell Flats. Who knew that? Yeah, there we go. There's the swampiness of the whole thing. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will dredge for Henry Bacon, okay, millions of cubic yards of mud out of the Potomac and will bring it into this area where the reflecting pool will be. But this is the catch, Deb. And I'm not an engineer myself, but I do know that it doesn't sound that good. They will put down the mud, they'll put down some asphalt, and then apparently it becomes like squishy, like a sponge. And there's no pilings, there's no real structural foundation except for this mud and some of this asphalt. So it starts to sink. And it's finished being built in 1923 and it opens for the public. But fast forward to 1980, Deb, and it sinks by a foot.
Wow.
So, although our government in 1980 will try to correct the issue with the sinking reflecting pool, and millions of dollars were put forth to do this, it's still a problem. And it's still a problem today. And now President Trump has wanted to make the reflecting pool great again, like he wants to make America great again. But it's still sinking, and we have an algae problem to top it all off. So I defer to you, my dear friend Deb, to tell us what in the world algae is and why there's a problem going on there. There it is. There's that stuff. So
There it
what is
is.
that, Deb?
Yuck. Anybody who has a fish tank knows that if you fill it up with water and you put it near the window, sunlight will come in, especially if it's stagnant water, and algae will begin to grow. So it's a microscopic plant that takes off and blooms. You may have heard about algae blooms on the news when dead fish will wash up on shore looking like they suffocated. Well, they actually did suffocate. So what happens is if they take the water from the Potomac River and they pour it into this very shallow basin called the pool, there's not much depth and it's very stagnant. There's no movement whatsoever. And again, if you do basic biology and you have a fish tank, you know that you have to break the tank in, which means that chemicals go up, chemicals go down, like nitrogen and ammonia, and then the tank breaks in. Well, instead of waiting for the tank to break in or the pool to break in this case, they just poured the water in and they had previously painted it blue to match the American flag. So when they painted it blue, they didn't put a polymer down. They just painted against the concrete. There was nothing to the paint to adhere to. So then they added the water, and the water had algae already in it, which is microscopic at the time. And so it was stagnant and it was out in the hot sun, and boom, algae bloom. It's a simple equation. So what did they do to rectify the problem? Hydrogen peroxide can break up algae. It can kill it, depending on what type of algae it is. It works on blue-green algae and some green algae. So they had to test the tank or the pool first, and they had to see what kind of algae was in there. And it was actually a combination of blue-green and green. So they started with the buckets and pouring the bottles of hydrogen peroxide in to kill the algae. They also used electronic hydrolators to try to agitate the water. So it would cause a vibration and also break it up. But what happened was they forgot about the paint. The paint was holding on just by a thin little microscopic, boop, like that. And so when they put the hydrogen in,
Yeah.
the blue paint floated away from the walls. There was nothing to hold it onto. So now we have algae, blue paint, and not much of a reflecting pool.
Yeah. And what I heard, Deb, was that when President Trump wanted to celebrate his birthday and the 250th birthday of our country, he had this UFC fight right on the lawn. And he wanted the reflecting pool to look so beautiful and blue naturally. We would all want it to look like that. So there are apparently these little machines, these little technological machines that are on the side of the reflecting pool. There's a few of them, and they are there especially to keep the algae from growing and blooming.
They're
Well, he
agitators.
wanted them removed, right?
Yeah,
He wanted them
yeah.
removed because why? They were noisy, he said, and not aesthetic. So they were removed, and sure enough, everything looked blue that night for the UFC fight, but the next day, the algae was back, blooming, as you are talking about. So, you'd think he would have thought about that, or people would have advised him not to remove those machines to keep the algae away. What do you think? What?
Well, I think that he could try again in another 250 years because we'll be having another anniversary again. But for
Yeah.
this year, it turned out to be pea soup.
Yeah, pea soup, exactly. So that's the thing. I mean, questions asked what happened to the reflecting pool? How was it made? What is algae? Questions answered. This is what we're going to do each time we meet, guys. We hope that you'll send in some questions via Spotify, which is where you can find us. We'll drop shows generally on Wednesdays. And we're so glad you joined us today. Hope that you will join us again, right, Deb?
Right? Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now.